Look, I'm just gonna say it straight. I saw something in those woods that I can't explain. And before you roll your eyes and click away, just hear me out. Because what started as the deal of a lifetime turned into the biggest mistake I ever made. I bought this massive piece of land up north back in February. Hundreds of acres of pristine forest, a decent cabin already on the property, and the price was so low I thought there had to be a catch. We're talking about land that should have gone for 3 times what I paid. In that area, properties like this don't come cheap. But here was this guy practically begging me to take it off his hands. The meeting to sign the papers was weird from the start. The previous owner practically threw the deed at me. This guy looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Eyes all bloodshot, dark circles underneath them like bruises. His hands were shaking when he signed the papers, actually shaking. I asked if he was okay and he just nodded, didn't even look at me. He kept saying he just wanted to move to the city, be around people again, said the isolation got to him. But it was the way he said it that stuck with me. Not like someone who was just lonely, more like someone who was running from something. He kept checking his watch, tapping his foot, looking at the door, like he couldn't wait to get out of there, to get as far from that property as possible. I remember at one point during the signing, his phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went white, completely white. Declined the call without answering, and when I asked if everything was all right, he just muttered something about a reminder he'd set. But the look on his face wasn't someone remembering an appointment. It was fear. Pure, undiluted fear. I'm not an idiot though. I did my homework, checked for liens, environmental violations, zoning issues. Everything came back clean. The property records were spotless, no history of anything weird. So I figured the guy was just burnt out on the isolation. Some people aren't cut out for living in the middle of nowhere. I am, or at least I thought I was. My plan was simple. Build a few rental cabins, market them to hunters and nature lovers, make a decent living off tourism. The land was gorgeous. Dense forest, a couple streams running through it, wildlife everywhere. It was perfect. There were still patches of snow on the ground when I took ownership, but spring was coming. I had everything mapped out. First thing I did was set up trail cameras all over the property. The good kind that connect to the cloud so I could check them from my laptop without having to trek out to each one. I wanted to document what kind of animals were around, maybe use the footage for marketing later. City people love that stuff. The camera started sending back exactly what I expected. Deer mostly, lots of deer, some raccoons, a fox here and there. One morning I got footage of a black bear, which got my heart racing a bit. But that's just part of living out here. You respect the wildlife, keep your distance, and everything's fine. I was feeling pretty good about the whole thing. I spent most of my time at the cabin, which the previous owner had left fully furnished. Basic stuff, but functional. Wood stove, generator for power, propane for cooking. It was actually kind of nice being out there alone. Quiet, peaceful. I'd spend my days walking the property, making notes about where to clear land for the new cabins. The surveyor was scheduled to come out in a couple weeks. Everything was falling into place. Then one morning, about 2 weeks after I moved in, I was having my coffee and checking the camera feeds when I saw it. This shape moving through the trees. At first I thought it was a person. Had to be, right? But something was off. The proportions weren't quite right. Way too tall. And the way it moved wasn't how a person moves through dense forest. I clicked through the different camera angles, trying to get a better view. Most of them caught it from pretty far away, just this dark figure moving between the trees with this purposeful gait. But one camera, the one I'd positioned near the creek where I thought I'd get good wildlife shots, that one got something different. That one got a closer look. When I zoomed in on that image, my coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. My blood went cold. This thing was covered in hair from head to toe. dark reddish brown, matted looking, like it had been living rough in the woods for years. The body was massive, probably 7 or 8 feet tall at least. Broad shoulders that looked wider than any human's, long arms that hung down almost to the knees. But it was the face that made me stop breathing for a second. When I enhanced the image, when I really looked at it, I saw something that shouldn't exist. The face looked almost human in structure, the way the features were arranged. But everything was wrong. The brow was too heavy, jutting out over these dark eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. The nose was flat and wide, almost gorilla-like. The mouth was barely visible through all that hair, just a dark line. The body looked powerful. You could see the muscle definition even through the hair, the way it stood there, balanced on 2 legs like a person, but with this posture that was just slightly off. More primitive somehow, more primal. The arms and legs were thick with muscle. This thing could probably snap a tree branch as thick as my leg without much effort. I sat there staring at my laptop screen for a good 10 minutes. My first thought was that someone was messing with me. Had to be some teenagers in a costume, right? Some prank. Maybe they'd heard about the property changing hands and thought it would be funny to scare the new owner. I called the police, told them there was a trespasser on my property dressed up in some kind of costume. The dispatcher put me through to an officer, and when I gave him my address, there was this long pause. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. Turns out the previous owner had called them dozens of times, always the same story. A hairy creature on his land, something big moving through the woods. They'd driven out every single time, walked the property, never found anything, started thinking he was losing his mind. The officer basically dismissed me, said it was probably just kids, told me not to worry about it. When I mentioned I had pictures, he just laughed it off. Said people with too much time on their hands will do anything for attention. That pissed me off. I had clear evidence of someone trespassing, and they wouldn't even come take a look. Fine, I'd handle it myself. Good thing I'd bought that rifle before moving out here. It was supposed to be for wolves, maybe a problem bear. Now I'd use it to scare off whoever was playing dress up in my woods. I had a logging crew scheduled to arrive in 5 days. They were going to clear a section of forest so I could start construction on the first cabin. I needed to deal with this trespasser situation before they showed up. Last thing I needed was workers getting spooked by some idiot in a gorilla suit. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound had me on edge. The cabin creaked and groaned as it settled. Wind moved through the trees outside, making them sway and moan. Normal sounds I'd heard every night since moving in. But tonight they felt different, threatening somehow. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows move across it from the moonlight filtering through the window. My mind kept going back to those images, that face, those eyes, the sheer size of it. If it was a costume, it was the most elaborate, most realistic costume I'd ever seen. The way the hair moved in the breeze, the way the muscles shifted under the skin. You can't fake that level of detail. Around midnight, I heard something that made every hair on my body stand up. This low, rumbling growl from deep in the forest. It started quiet, almost subsonic, something you felt more than heard. Then it got louder, deeper, this resonant sound that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself, through the walls of the cabin, through my chest. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. The sound lasted maybe 10 seconds, then faded away into nothing. Silence fell over the forest like a blanket. No insects, no birds, no small animals rustling in the undergrowth. Just silence, like everything out there was holding its breath, hiding. I told myself it was probably a boar, Wild boars can make some really strange noises, especially when they're angry or territorial. But even as I thought it, I didn't believe it. That sound was too deep, too powerful. It didn't sound like any animal I'd ever heard. And the way it made me feel, the primal fear it triggered, that wasn't a normal response to a pig. I got up, went to the window, looked out at the tree line, darkness and shadows. The moon was half full, giving enough light to see the outline of the trees, but not much else. Everything looked normal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching, waiting. I lay in bed going over everything. The way the previous owner couldn't wait to leave, his insistence that he just wanted to be around people again, the police calls he'd made. It all started adding up to something I didn't want to think about. What if he hadn't been crazy? What if there really was something out there? Number, that was stupid. There's no such thing as Bigfoot. It's all hoaxes and blurry photographs and people wanting attention. Someone was screwing with me, and I was going to find them and make it very clear they weren't welcome on my property. Morning couldn't come fast enough. I forced down some breakfast, even though my stomach was in knots. Toast and coffee that tasted like cardboard and dirt. I loaded my rifle, checked it twice, made sure I had extra ammunition in my jacket pocket. The weight of the gun should have been reassuring. It wasn't. I headed into the forest around 8 in the morning. The sun was just starting to burn off the early morning mist that hung between the trees like ghosts. It was beautiful, actually. Golden light filtering through the branches, dew sparkling on the undergrowth. Would have been a perfect morning for a hike under different circumstances, but I couldn't appreciate it. Every nerve in my body was on high alert. I followed the trail toward where the cameras had caught that thing. My boots crunched on the leftover snow and dead leaves, way too loud in all that silence. The forest felt different than it had before. Oppressive somehow, like it was watching me. The trees seemed to lean in closer, the shadows seemed darker. That's when I noticed how quiet it was. Usually when you walk through the forest, there's noise everywhere. Birds calling to each other, squirrels chattering and running along branches, the rustling of small animals in the underbrush. But that morning it was like walking through a morgue, silent, still, dead. About half a mile in, I found the first footprint. I almost walked right past it. Would have, if something hadn't made me look down at just the right moment. There, in a patch of mud next to the trail, was the clearest track I'd ever seen. And it was massive. I knelt down next to it, comparing it to my own boot print nearby. My boot is a size 11, pretty average. This track was easily twice the length of my boot. Had to be at least 18 inches long, maybe 20, and wide too, probably 8 or 9 inches across at the ball of the foot. But what really got me was the detail. 5 toes clearly visible, a defined heel, an arch in the middle, just like a human foot. The toes were longer than human toes though, and splayed out more, adapted for gripping, for walking on uneven terrain. The depth of the impression in the mud told me this thing was heavy. Really heavy. Had to be 400 pounds or more to sink that deep. My hands started shaking as I stared at that print. I told myself it could be fake. Someone could have carved a wooden foot, pressed it into the mud. But the edges were too clean, too natural. When you press something into mud, you get compression patterns, distortion. This looked like something organic had stepped there, like real flesh and bone had left this impression. And there were more. Now that I knew what to look for, I saw them everywhere. A trail of prints leading deeper into the woods. They were spaced far apart too. Each step was probably 4 or 5 feet, longer than any human stride. Whatever made these tracks had long legs and moved with purpose through this forest. That's when I heard it. This vocalization from somewhere ahead of me. Not quite a howl, not quite a roar, something in between. It was so loud it seemed to vibrate in my chest. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but I stood my ground. I shouted into the trees, told whoever was out there that this was private property, that they needed to leave now or I'd call the cops, that I was armed. My voice sounded small and weak in all that forest. The only response was silence. I kept walking. The trees started to thin out a bit, and I came to this area where the forest opened up into a small clearing, lots of green moss, some fallen logs, and standing on the far side, maybe 60 yards away, was something tall and dark. My first clear look at it, even from that distance, I could tell it was huge, had to be at least 8 feet tall, maybe more. Broad across the shoulders, covered in that dark hair. It was just standing there, completely still, facing away from me. My mind was racing. This had to be a person in a costume. Had to be. I shouted again, told them to get out. Now. The figure didn't move, didn't even flinch, just stood there like a statue. I started moving toward it, rifle aimed at the ground but ready. Each step felt like walking through molasses. Everything in me was screaming to stop, to turn around, to get the hell out of there. But I kept going. I was tired of being scared, tired of feeling like I'd made a huge mistake buying this property. When I was maybe 40 yards away, the thing moved, just slightly, a shift of weight from one leg to the other. But the way it moved made my blood run cold. It wasn't the jerky, awkward movement of someone in a costume. It was fluid, natural, like watching a deer or a bear. But this wasn't a deer or a bear. I took another step and it turned its head. Just the head, not the whole body. Turned and looked right at me. I couldn't see the face clearly from that distance, but I could see the eyes. Dark eyes that caught the light filtering through the trees. Eyes that were watching me with what looked like intelligence. Calculation. Then it was gone. Just vanished into the trees. 1 second it was there, the next it had melted into the shadows. I heard branches cracking, heavy footfalls moving away fast. Way faster than any human could move through that terrain. I stood there frozen, heart hammering in my chest. Part of me wanted to chase after it, prove to myself it was just a person. But a deeper part, the part that still listens to those old survival instincts we all have buried inside us, that part was telling me to leave it alone. I went after it anyway. Looking back now, I can't believe how stupid I was. But in that moment, something in me snapped. Maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was denial. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself that this was explainable, that there was a rational answer. Whatever it was, I followed that thing into the woods like an idiot. The trail it left was impossible to miss. Broken branches hanging at odd angles, disturbed undergrowth where something large had pushed through, more of those massive footprints in the soft earth and patches of snow. I followed as quickly as I could while trying to stay quiet. My rifle was up, ready, safety off. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my temples. The forest got darker as I went deeper. The canopy grew thicker overhead, blocking out more and more of the morning sun. The undergrowth got denser too, making it harder to move quietly. Branches grabbed at my jacket, roots tried to trip me, and all around me were shadows, deep shadows that could have been hiding anything. I saw it again maybe 10 minutes into my pursuit, just a glimpse through the trees to my right, moving parallel to my path now instead of away. A dark shape slipping between trunks, there 1 second and gone the next. It was pacing me, staying just out of clear sight but close enough that I could track its movement. That's when the real fear set in. The realization that hit me like a punch to the gut. I wasn't chasing it. It was leading me somewhere, playing with me, like a cat plays with a mouse before the kill. It could have disappeared completely if it wanted to. Could have left me wandering in circles. Instead, it was keeping me engaged, keeping me following, luring me deeper into its territory. I stopped walking, tried to get my bearings. My hands were sweating on the rifle despite the cold. I looked around, really looked, and started noticing things I'd missed before. Trees with bark stripped off at impossible heights, 7 feet up, 8 feet up, places no human could reach without a ladder. The marks looked fresh too, the exposed wood still light-colored. More signs everywhere once I started paying attention. Branches broken off at those same impossible heights, scratch marks on tree trunks, deep gouges that looked like they'd been made by something with incredible strength. And the smell. God, the smell was getting stronger. This thick, musky odor that reminded me of a wet dog mixed with something else. Something primal and wild. It seemed to hang in the air like a fog, getting more intense the deeper I went. Then I saw movement to my right, spun toward it, rifle coming up instinctively. There it was again, closer this time, maybe 30 yards away, standing perfectly still between 2 large pine trees. It wasn't hiding now, wasn't trying to stay out of sight. It was just standing there, completely motionless, watching me. And I was watching it. This time I got a good look. A clear, unobstructed view in a shaft of sunlight that broke through the canopy. The body was massive, easily over 400 pounds of solid muscle covered in that reddish-brown hair. The hair itself was interesting, longer on the head and shoulders, shorter on the arms and legs, matted in places, almost dreadlocked like it had been living rough in the elements for years. The arms were incredibly long, hanging down past where the knees would be. Hands that looked powerful, with long fingers ending in what might have been nails or claws. I couldn't tell from that distance. The chest was barrel-shaped, massive, rising and falling with slow, measured breaths. The legs were thick and muscular, slightly bent at the knees, in a way that suggested it could move extremely fast if it wanted to. And the face. Sweet Jesus, the face. That's what broke my brain, what made me finally accept that this wasn't a person in a costume. It looked almost human, that was the horrifying part. The general structure was there, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth. But everything was wrong. The brow ridge was massive, jutting out over those dark eyes like a shelf. The eyes themselves were set deep in the skull, shadowed, but I could see them tracking me, following my every movement with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. The nose was flat and wide, almost gorilla-like, with large nostrils that flared as it breathed. The mouth was barely visible through all that hair around the lower face, just a thin dark line. The skull itself seemed more elongated than a human's, sloped back from that heavy brow, and there was something about the proportions that was just off. The distance between the eyes, the width of the jaw. Little things that added up to something that was definitely not human, but definitely not quite ape either. Something in between, something impossible. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. Time seemed to slow down, stretch out. I was aware of every detail. The way the light filtered through the trees, the sound of my own breathing, harsh and rapid, the weight of the rifle in my hands, the absolute stillness of that creature watching me. I raised my rifle slightly, not really aiming at it, just reacting to the threat. The movement was tiny, just a few inches, but the creature saw it, reacted to it. I watched the muscles tense under that hair, watched it shift its weight forward slightly. The posture changed from passive observation to something more aggressive, more predatory. Everything about its body language screamed danger. The way it balanced on those powerful legs, the way the arms hung ready at its sides, the slight forward lean of the torso. This thing could move fast when it wanted to, could probably cover the 30 yards between us in seconds, could probably tear me apart before I even got a shot off. Then it did something that broke whatever courage I had left. It took a step toward me, just one deliberate, purposeful step. The massive foot came down on the forest floor with surprising softness despite the creature's size. But the intent was clear. It was done watching, done observing. Now it was moving. The way it moved shattered the last of my denial. This wasn't a person in a suit, couldn't be. The movement was too smooth, too natural, too fluid. The proportions were all wrong for a human. The arms were too long, the torso too barrel-shaped, the legs bent at angles that would be impossible for someone in a costume to maintain. This was something else, something real. I took a step back, then another. My boot caught on something, a root or a rock, and I stumbled, caught myself with my free hand against a tree trunk. When I looked up again, it had moved, closer. It had closed half the distance between us without making a sound, without me even seeing it move. It was just suddenly there, 15 yards away, those dark eyes still locked on mine. That broke whatever spell I was under. Some deep survival instinct kicked in and overrode everything else. Every thought, every question, every bit of curiosity. All that was left was pure animal terror. The kind of fear our ancestors must have felt when they were being stalked by predators. The fear that's coded into our DNA. I turned and ran, not even trying to be strategic about it, not thinking about the terrain or where I was going, just running. Pure flight response, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at my face and arms. My lungs burned. My legs felt like they were made of lead, but I kept running. Behind me, I could hear it following, not running, just walking. Those long, purposeful strides eating up ground effortlessly. I could hear branches snapping, the thud of those massive feet hitting the earth. It was keeping pace with me without even trying, playing with me, like a cat that's caught a mouse and isn't quite ready to end the game yet. I ran harder, pushed through the pain in my chest, the burning in my legs. I don't know how long I ran. Time had no meaning. There was just the forest blurring past me, the sound of my own ragged breathing, the pounding of my heart, and the knowledge that something was following me, something big and fast and deadly. At some point, I realized I'd dropped the rifle. Didn't even remember when, didn't care. The rifle wouldn't have helped anyway. If that thing wanted me dead, I'd be dead. The gun was just extra weight slowing me down. All that mattered was distance. Getting away, getting to safety. I burst out of the tree line near the cabin and stumbled, went down on my hands and knees, stayed there for a moment, gasping, trying to get air into my burning lungs. My vision was blurry with tears from the wind and exertion. My whole body was shaking, not just my hands anymore, but everything. My legs felt like jelly. When I could finally breathe again, when I could see straight, I looked back at the forest. Nothing, just the silent wall of trees. But I knew it was out there, somewhere in those shadows, watching me. I could feel its eyes on me like a physical weight. The forest was completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing, like everything was holding its breath. I stumbled toward the cabin, legs shaking so bad I could barely walk. My whole body was trembling. I'd dropped my rifle somewhere in the woods, didn't even remember when, didn't care. I just needed to get inside, lock the door, get away from those trees. I made it to the porch, fumbled with the door handle, got inside and slammed it shut behind me, through the deadbolt. Then I just stood there, back against the door, sliding down until I was sitting on the floor. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. After a while, I managed to get up, went to the sink, splashed cold water on my face, looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the person looking back. Eyes too wide, skin too pale. I looked like I'd seen a ghost, maybe I had, or maybe something worse. I needed to leave. That was the only clear thought in my head. Pack up, get out, never come back. I started throwing things in my duffel bag. Clothes, important papers, didn't even care what. Just needed to get out before dark. That's when I saw it through the window, standing at the edge of the tree line, maybe 50 yards from the cabin, just standing there in broad daylight, not even trying to hide. The creature, it was watching the cabin, watching me. I backed away from the window, heart racing again. When I looked back, it was still there, just standing, waiting. In the daylight, I could see it even more clearly. The massive frame, the way the hair moved slightly in the breeze, the way it stood there with such confidence, such stillness, like it owned this place and I was the intruder. And the eyes, even from that distance, I could see them fixed on the cabin, on me. There was something in that stare that made me understand. This wasn't curiosity. This was hunting behavior. It was stalking me. The creature looked savage, primal, like something out of time, out of place. Its face had this raw, wild quality to it. The heavy brow, the broad features, all that hair. But underneath there was something intelligent, something that was thinking, planning. That was the scariest part. This wasn't just an animal acting on instinct. This thing was aware. I grabbed my bag, didn't even finish packing, went to the back door, the one facing away from where it was standing. Cracked it open slowly, listened, nothing but wind in the trees. I slipped out, stayed low, moved as quickly and quietly as I could toward where I'd parked my truck. The truck was only about 30 yards from the cabin, but it felt like miles. Every step I expected to hear that roar, to feel those arms grab me. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. Finally, the engine turned over and I floored it, fishtailing on the dirt road, gravel spraying everywhere. I looked in the rearview mirror as I tore down the trail. The creature was standing in the middle of the road behind me, watching me leave. Just standing there like it had won, like it knew I wasn't coming back. I drove until I hit the main highway, then kept driving until I found a motel, checked in, locked the door, and sat on the bed for hours just staring at the wall. My phone kept buzzing, the logging crew calling to confirm their arrival, the building inspector wanting to schedule his visit, all these messages about a future on that property that wasn't going to happen. I called and canceled everything the next day. The logging crew, the inspector, the architect I'd hired to design the cabins, all of it. Just canceled and didn't explain why. What was I going to say? That there was a Bigfoot on the property? They'd think I was insane. Hell, I was starting to think I was insane. But I know what I saw. I know what chased me through those woods. I know it stood outside my cabin watching me with those dark, intelligent eyes. It was real as I am. I went back one time, a week later, in the middle of the day with 2 friends for backup. We went straight to the cabin, loaded up the rest of my stuff, and got out. The whole time, I felt like we were being watched. My friends kept asking what was wrong, why I was in such a hurry. I couldn't tell them. They wouldn't have believed me anyway. I found more tracks while we were loading the truck. Fresh ones right outside the cabin, big as before. My friends didn't notice. They weren't looking. But I saw them. It had come back. Maybe it came back every night. Now I'm trying to sell the property. Listed it even cheaper than what I paid. No taker so far. Maybe word's gotten around. Maybe people can tell something's off about that place. Or maybe I'm just unlucky. Sometimes I wonder about the previous owner, whether he's sleeping better now that he's in the city, whether he feels guilty for not warning me. But what could he have said? That there's a Bigfoot on the property? I wouldn't have believed him either. I think about that creature a lot. Wonder what it is, where it came from, how many of them are out there, whether anyone would believe me if I told them the truth. But mostly I think about those eyes, the way they looked at me. Not like I was prey, more like I was competition. Like I'd wandered into its territory and it was letting me know in no uncertain terms that I wasn't welcome. I was an intruder on that land, not the rightful owner. That thing, whatever it was, had been there long before me. It would be there long after. That forest was its home, and I was just another human who learned too late that some places aren't meant for us. I still have nightmares about it. Wake up in the middle of the night thinking I hear that roar, that growl from deep in the woods. Sometimes I dream I'm back in that forest, running through the trees with that thing following me. In the dreams, I can never move fast enough. My legs feel like they're stuck in mud, and it's always getting closer, always right behind me. I wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, sure I'm about to feel those massive hands grab me. Other times I dream about what would have happened if I hadn't run, if I'd stood my ground. Those dreams are worse. In those dreams, I see what it can do. The strength in those arms, the speed it's capable of. I watch myself get torn apart and wake up screaming. My girlfriend left me after the third time that happened, said I needed help, said something was wrong with me. She wasn't wrong. The worst part is knowing it's still out there, still in those woods, still walking that property at night, leaving tracks, stripping bark from trees, being exactly what it is. Existing, surviving, thriving in a world that claims it doesn't exist. And knowing that eventually, inevitably, someone else is going to buy that land. Someone else is going to have an experience. Maybe like mine, maybe worse. Should I warn them? Should I tell potential buyers the truth? But how do you explain something like that? How do you put in a property listing that there's a cryptid on the land without sounding completely insane? You can't. There's no way to do it. That doesn't make you look like you've lost your mind. So I don't. I just lower the price and hope someone figures it out on their own before it's too late. Sometimes I wonder if I should go to the media, tell my story, show what little evidence I have. But I deleted all the camera footage in a panic after I left. Wiped it all because looking at those images made me feel like it could see me through the screen, like even the recordings had some kind of power over me. Stupid, I know, but fear makes you do stupid things. And even if I had kept the footage, would anyone believe it? Would they think it was real, or would they accuse me of faking it for attention? The internet is full of fake Bigfoot videos, hoaxes and frauds and people in gorilla suits. My real footage would just get lumped in with all the fakes. Nobody would take it seriously. I'd become a joke, a cautionary tale about what happens when isolation makes you crazy. Looking back, all the signs were there from the beginning. The way the previous owner looked at that closing, the panic in his eyes that I mistook for anxiety, the way he practically ran from that property once the papers were signed. He knew exactly what was out there, and he couldn't wait to pass that burden onto someone else, onto me. The police reports should have been a red flag too. All those calls about a hairy creature on the property. The cops dismissing him as crazy. They'd been out there multiple times, found nothing, and written him off as someone who couldn't handle the isolation. But he wasn't crazy. He was telling the truth. And nobody listened, just like nobody would listen to me now if I told them the same story. If I'd done more research, if I'd asked more questions, if I'd listened to my gut when something felt off about that deal. But I was so focused on the opportunity, so excited about the price and the possibilities. I ignored every warning sign because I wanted to believe I'd found something special, and I had. Just not in the way I expected. The cameras are still out there, mounted on trees all over the property, still connected to the cloud, still capturing images whenever something triggers the motion sensors. I could log in right now and see what's been happening on that land since I left. But I can't bring myself to do it. Don't want to see that thing walking around what should have been my cabin sites. Don't want confirmation that it's still there, still real, still existing in defiance of everything I thought I knew about the world. Because sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I tell myself that maybe it wasn't real. Maybe the isolation did get to me. Maybe I had some kind of breakdown out there, alone in the woods with nothing but my own thoughts for company. Maybe my mind created that creature as a manifestation of my fears. It would be easier to believe that. Easier to think I'm just mentally ill rather than accept that something like that is real. But then I remember the details, the way the muscles moved under that reddish-brown hair, the smell that hung in the air, thick and musky and animal, the tracks pressed deep into the mud, the way those eyes looked at me with unmistakable intelligence, the sound of those footfalls following me through the forest. You can't imagine that level of detail. You can't hallucinate something that visceral, that overwhelming, that terrifying in every physical sense. It was real. I know it was real with the same certainty that I know I'm sitting here writing this now. And somewhere out there in those woods, hidden among trees that have stood for hundreds of years, it's still real, still walking around on two legs, still watching the cabin from the tree line when night falls, still being something that's not supposed to exist but does anyway, has existed for who knows how long, will probably exist long after I'm gone. People ask me sometimes why I gave up on such a great opportunity, why I'm selling at a massive loss, why I won't go back, not even to supervise development. I usually make up something about the isolation being harder than I expected, about missing civilization and human contact, about realizing the business plan wasn't as solid as I thought, about wanting to be closer to family. They nod and accept these explanations because they make sense. They're rational, they're normal, they fit into the world as people understand it. The truth doesn't make sense. The truth isn't rational or normal. The truth doesn't fit into anyone's understanding of how the world works. The truth is that I saw something that shattered my entire worldview, something that made me realize we share this planet with creatures we don't understand and aren't meant to understand. Something that made me understand why our ancestors told stories around campfires about monsters in the woods and warned their children never to go too deep into the forest alone. Because they weren't just stories, they weren't metaphors or morality tales or ways to keep kids from wandering off. They were warnings based on real experiences, real encounters. Our ancestors knew there were things in the deep woods, things that walked on two legs but weren't human, things that were better left alone. We modern people with our smartphones and GPS and satellite imagery, we think we've mapped everything, think we know what's out there. We're wrong. I lost more than money on that property, more than time and effort and planning. I lost something fundamental, that comfortable certainty that we understand the world, that science has explained everything worth explaining, that creatures like Bigfoot are just myths and legends and misidentifications. I lost my sense of safety, the feeling that civilization has conquered nature, that we're at the top of the food chain with nothing to fear. I can't get that back. Can't unsee what I saw, can't unknow what I know. Once you've looked into the eyes of something that shouldn't exist and seen intelligence looking back, you're changed. The world becomes a different place, darker, more mysterious, more dangerous. You realize that the shadows hide more than you ever imagined, that the deep woods harbor secrets we were never meant to discover. So yeah, the land's still for sale. Prime location, hundreds of acres of pristine forest, existing cabin with all utilities, creek running through the property, great for development or private retreat, priced way below market value, motivated seller. If you're interested, I can send you the listing, I can give you the coordinates, show you pictures, provide all the documentation you need. Just do me a favor. If you buy it, be careful. Pay attention to your surroundings. Listen to that little voice in the back of your head when something doesn't feel right. And if you see something moving through the trees that looks almost human but not quite, don't investigate. Don't try to prove what it is. Don't take pictures or videos. Don't follow it. Just pack up your things and leave. Trust me on this one. Some things are better left alone because that property doesn't belong to whoever holds the deed. It doesn't belong to any human and never did. It belongs to whatever is living in these woods, to something that was there before the first settler ever set foot in that valley, before the first surveyor drew a map, before anyone thought to claim ownership of wild land. And it's made that very, very clear to the previous owner, to me. And it will make it clear to the next person too if they don't listen. I've thought about going public with my experience, really public. Not just an anonymous post online, but my name and face attached to it, telling people what's out there, warning them. But who would believe me? Without evidence, without proof, I'm just another person claiming they saw Bigfoot, another anecdote to add to the thousands of other anecdotes that people dismiss without a second thought. Another story filed away under crazy person or attention seeker or misidentification. And honestly, even if I did have ironclad proof, would I want to share it? Would I want hunters and thrill seekers and amateur cryptozoologists swarming that property? Would I want to be responsible for what might happen to them when they encounter something they're not prepared for? Because here's what I learned out there, what I know with absolute certainty. That creature isn't some gentle giant. It's not friendly. It's not curious about humans in a benign way. It's a predator. It's territorial, and it doesn't want us there. Maybe that's why they've stayed hidden for so long. Not because they're shy or afraid of us, but because they're smart enough to know that staying hidden is what keeps them safe. What keeps the peace between our species. An uneasy truce that's lasted for centuries, millennia perhaps. They stay deep in their forests. We stay in our cities and towns. And when someone like me stumbles into the wrong place at the wrong time, we learn real quick to back off, to leave, to never come back. The native peoples around that area, they have stories. I looked into it after I left, trying to find some kind of explanation, some framework for understanding what I'd experienced. They have names for these creatures in their languages: Sasquatch, Skookum, the old ones, the forest people. They've known about them for generations, centuries. They have protocols for avoiding them, rules about where not to go and when. Warnings passed down through oral tradition. They respect these creatures, fear them, yes, but also respect them. Recognize them as the original inhabitants of those forests, as beings with their own rights to exist unmolested. And they know, as I know now, that these creatures are dangerous, that they're not to be trifled with, that the smart thing, the only thing really, is to stay away from their territory and leave them alone. We modern people, we think we're so evolved, so advanced. We have technology and science and rational explanations for everything. We map the world with satellites. We have trail cameras and night vision and DNA sequencing. We think if something existed, we'd know about it. We'd have proof, evidence, scientific validation. But maybe we're not as smart as we think we are. Maybe there are things that exist outside our ability to prove or document or explain. Things that survive precisely because they're good at not being found. I'm rambling now. I do that when I think about this stuff too long. Try to make sense of it. Try to fit it into some kind of logical framework. But it doesn't fit. It just is. And I just have to live with knowing it exists. The property will sell eventually. Someone will buy it, probably at an even lower price after it's been sitting on the market for months. They'll think they're getting an amazing deal. They'll make plans just like I did. Build cabins, start a business, live off the land. And maybe they'll be fine, maybe the creature will leave them alone, or maybe they'll have the same experience I did. Part of me hopes the creature just leaves, moves on to some other part of the forest where there aren't any humans. But I know that's not how it works. That's its home. Has been for who knows how long. It's not going anywhere. And neither are the memories of what I saw that day. So if you ever find yourself looking at a property that seems too good to be true, that's priced way below market value, that the owner is desperate to sell, ask yourself why. Ask a few extra questions. Check if there have been any police calls to that address. Trust your gut if something feels off. Because sometimes there's a reason a place is cheap. Sometimes there's a reason people want to leave so badly. And if you do buy it, if you do move out there, and if you start seeing things that don't quite make sense, don't do what I did. Don't investigate. Don't try to prove anything. Just pack up and leave. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Some truths are better left undiscovered. Trust me on that. I've said enough. More than enough, probably. I just needed to tell someone what really happened, why I'm selling, why I'll never go back. Because carrying this around alone has been eating at me. And maybe, just maybe, if someone else ends up buying that property and they somehow stumble across this story, they'll have a heads up. They'll know what's out there. They'll know to be careful. Or maybe they'll think I'm crazy, just like everyone else would. Maybe they'll laugh it off and move forward with their plans. I can't control that. All I can do is tell the truth and hope someone listens. Because whatever that thing is, it's still out there, still in those woods, still real. And knowing that changes everything. For more interesting stories, check this out.